Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. We've all heard these clichés, that hard work will get us ahead, and that to be more productive, we're better off focusing on the urgent and important stuff. Well, that advice isn't all it's cracked up to be, says productivity expert Donna McGeorge, who's written 10 books, including The 25-Minute Meeting and The One-Day Refund. She'd like to bust some of these myths around productivity. After all, as she explains to Chris Ashmore, there just doesn't seem to be enough time anymore.
So I remember a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away, when I used to get to work and I'd turn on my computer. This is going to show my age more than anything. And in the time it would take for my computer to boot up, I'd go off and make myself a cup of tea, have a bit of a yak with the people around me at work, and then I'd get back to my desk and it'd be ready for me to log in, and even that would take time. So let's say it took a good 5 minutes for me to get going. Could you imagine now if your computer took 5 minutes to get going, or you had to wait? I mean, I still remember the days when websites used to load line by line. Imagine that now. So I actually don't know that we've got less time, but I think our relationship to time has altered, and it makes us more impatient. It makes us want to go harder, go faster, do more, make it happen quicker. And I think that's an interesting question for your listeners to ponder around their relationship with time.
Well, that means, of course, that if we feel like we're running out of time, we need to be more productive. And I understand there are some myths about productivity.
Yes, and we've been told that hard work will get you ahead, that we need to be more productive. The word more comes up a lot. And that everything's urgent and important, and that's how we should judge what we do. So I think they're worth busting, don't you?
I think so. Well, let's go through each one. And the first myth, hard work will get you ahead.
Yes. Now, I do think sometimes, yes, if it's digging a hole in my back garden, then of course hard work's going to dig me a bigger hole. But given that most of us are knowledge workers in the kind of the leadership space and the corporate space, it's actually smart work is what will get you ahead. So things like using the Pareto principle, where you know, 80% of my results comes from 20% of my work, or the Pomodoro method, where if I focus for 25 minutes and take a 5-minute break, I get more done. They're examples of working smarter, and it certainly isn't about working harder. And one of the things I've found with myself and my clients and the people that I work with is that when we build in and we make them sacrosanct, breaks in the day, we can power through the stuff we need to get through. So this idea that I have to go hard, I think is worth challenging.
Right. The next myth is be more productive.
It's just about the word more. People say to me, how can I get more done? How can I get more time? How can I be more productive? And I'd love you to be thinking about doing less, frankly. And I think the question we should be asking ourselves, because each day when you say to me, you know, if someone says to me, how can I get more time in my day? I would say, actually, how could you do less? So rather than thinking I need an extra hour in my day, I'd say, look at my day and what could I take out? If I'm thinking about how do I get more done, I'd be saying, no, why don't you think about some things that don't need to be done? So one of my favourite things is a not to-do list. So to get up and look at your day, look at your meetings, look at your list and go, what are 3 things, what are 3 meetings, what are 3 tasks I could just not do, either forever or, you know, maybe push them out a little bit till time's a little less frantic.
Do you have an example?
I think sometimes I'm someone who's a little bit I'm a precrastinator. So if you think of procrastinator as someone who puts off doing things till the last minute, I tend to be a precrastinator, and there's a lot of us out there that try and get things done earlier than needed, quicker than needed, and of course we try and rope other people in to get it done. And so sometimes I have to remind myself that that project, so it could be a social media campaign for my next book that's coming out, I'd love to get that stitched up now, but it doesn't really need to be done till next month. And so it's just thinking, what's driving me to want to get this thing done right now? And what would happen? I love this question. What would happen if it didn't get done? Now, the world's not going to end. Push things out. Give yourself a bit more space.
Well, the next myth, the third myth, is urgent and important. What does that mean?
Well, we've kind of been indoctrinated into the old importance and urgency matrix. I first read about it in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which, if we just hold on to our hats for a second, was around 40 years ago that book was released, in the early 80s. That just makes me feel old. And so since then, we've learned that there's lots of aspects about how our bodies work, how our minds work, neuroscience, all that sort of stuff that says maybe, rather than allowing urgency and importance to be the driver of our priorities, maybe we need to think about intensity. How much brain power do I need for this particular task? And impact. Am I going to get the right return on my energetic investment? And so I'm all about, rather than it being urgent and important, I like people to think about working with the clock in their body, not the one on the wall. Recognise, are you an early bird or a night owl? And structure your day and your priorities according to when is the best time to do things, when your body and brain is at its most optimal for specific tasks.
Right. I want to ask you about yourself and the way you work, Donna, if you don't mind. You're a thought leader, you're a business coach, but you're also a writer. When you write, do you give yourself, say, a time limit, say an hour, and just see what happens in that hour? Or do you give yourself a project limit, like I will sit down and write a chapter? Or is it a combination of both?
Look, it's a combination of both. Most of the times I'll use book writing as an example.
Yep.
When I'm writing books, I'm typically given a word count. And so for my most recent book, let's say they wanted between 30 and 35,000 words. They then give me a time deadline. I break it down pretty systemically. And so let's say I've got 3 months to get a 35,000 word book done. And then I work out, so how many words a day, if I did word count every day, what would that look like? And because I've written around 11 books now, I kind of know my pace. And so I know that it takes me, a couple of hours to generate some half-decent, 2,000 half-decent words. For the most part, I do dedicate and block time. I always block time. Mm-hmm. And I always then, within that time, I set myself a goal. What is it that I want to do? Is it a chapter? Is it an edit? Is it am I going to review the whole manuscript in one sitting? Is it time to draw some models for it? But I set myself a target of time first and then activity.
Well, that leads me to this question. If you set yourself 2 hours to get a certain amount of words completed, what if you get it done in an hour? What do you do for the next hour?
I sit on my deck with my dog and have a cup of tea and contemplate the problems of the world. You've just asked a mouthful there, because most people listening to this would be immediately thinking, why wouldn't I just fill that extra hour with more stuff? But I actually rail against that. I'm like, if I've set myself a target for the day, for the hour, for the morning, whatever it is, and I get that done, I've now recovered, back to one of my original books, The One Day Refund, I've now refunded myself a little bit of time because I've managed to work a bit more effectively and efficiently than I thought. Now, just to kind of give a little bit of, keeping it real for your listeners, one thing that I've learned about in all my research and work in the area of productivity is sometimes we fall victim to the planning fallacy, where we underestimate how long things will take us. So let's say I want to write 2,000 words and I go, I can bash that out in half an hour, when actually it takes me 2, or it might take me 1.5, or it might take me 1. So I accommodate the planning fallacy in there, because I know I could get an interruption, I could get a phone call, I could have anything happen, but I know I've created sufficient time to get that task done. So most people who kind of feel like they're scrambling from one thing to the next, and the moment they're finished, they're starting something else, is often they haven't allowed enough time for the task itself.
Right. Well, I suppose to complete the circle from the start of the conversation, Donna, in summary, it's about working smarter with the time you've got.
Absolutely, it's about working smarter. It's actually conscious or intentional work. So I ask people to not just operate by default. So, for example, the default setting of just coming in and turning my email on and allowing my email to run my day. What would happen if you did it a bit differently? If you decided the night before my most important things, if you decided the night before that I'm going to, schedule breaks, so I'm going to block time for specific things, going back to the Mythbusters we talked about earlier. Working smarter isn't hacks. It's actually consciously thinking about what I'm doing and what I'm spending my time on each day.
That was productivity expert and author Donna McGeorge. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.